How is it possible to advance your career while being pregnant? And being pregnant with your first child. I know it's possible because I've done that, but I also have a pleasure speaking with Alex Love, who have done that as well. So hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of From a Woman to a Leader, a podcast dedicated to discussing women's unique challenges in the tech industry. I'm your host, Limor Bergman-Gross, and today I have a great pleasure interviewing Alex Love. Alex, she is a VP of Marketing and Communications at Riva Solutions, and her story is a powerful example of what it means to drive your career forward, even when facing major life changes. In her case, she shares the journey of advancing to a VP role while being pregnant with her first child, and how she successfully advocated for herself, how she continues to pave the path forward for other women in her team. So if you can relate to that and you're curious about navigating promotions, building trust with senior leaders, and making bold career moves, stick around. Let's dive right in. Hi Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well, how are you?
I'm pretty good. Thank you so much for being here today.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And I know that you are working at Riva Solutions.
Correct.
And let's kind of maybe start talking about your path there from a director to a VP and how you got promoted. So maybe you can share initially how you joined Riva Solutions and what was your initial role?
Yeah, sure. So I've been with the company about 4 years, almost to the day. And I joined coming out of a smaller consulting firm. And it was I just kind of felt like I had hit kind of the top of where I was going to get with the consulting firm there. As a marketer, I think you have to be very in line with the vision and the goals of the CEO. And I'd sort of started to think that the paths, were a little bit different at the previous firm. So passively looking for an opportunity. And I had met the CEO of Riva about a decade before. In passing at a networking event, I had a company prior and he was one of our first sponsors. We kept in touch here or there. But I reached out and said, hey, I see that you have a director of marketing role. I'm okay where I am right now, but I would be interested in having a conversation. And that kind of fast tracked me through to the process. And this is COVID 2020, like peak COVID season. And so, I didn't do any in-person interviews. I think I had one virtual interview with, one of the senior leaders there at the time. And then didn't hear anything for a little bit, and then ended up getting an offer to join the team that I had never met anyone else. I had never been to their office. I really had very low context to what I was getting myself into. But I, at the time, said, it's COVID, it's 2020, if this risk doesn't work out for me, I don't think anyone's going to hold me accountable for it, right? If I decide, hey, I mea culpa, I made a mistake, I need to leave. But thankfully that moment never came. And so I started off as their director of marketing. And the intent really was to build up a new department with them. They had some individuals who were functioning in that role, sort of as a cross collaboration, but they didn't have a true leader in the space, and they certainly didn't have any resources. So I came on, I hired my first intern, we sort of got started in the marketing function, and then very quickly was able to identify there were some other gap areas that I had some skill sets in that the company could benefit from. Being a small business, you have to wear a lot of hats. I had a background in communications and event management, and that was something that very quickly got assumed into my role as well. So a year later, I think I was director of marketing and communications, and we were doing events as well. So the scope has continued to get larger, but it's been a lot of fun. And I've been able to bring in some of the consulting background that I have. I do a lot of our strategic planning too. So, never a dull moment, but started off as that director of marketing and now sitting in this VP of marketing and communications role.
Wow, incredible. So I hear several things here, kind of just to summarize what I heard from you. So first of all, networking is important and you never know when you're gonna, encounter those people, right? That you meet. It's kind of one
Yeah,
thing.
it's one of those things, and I am a natural introvert. Networking is not at all natural to me. I do much better in small one-on-one conversations. So, like this big room networking thing for me, conferences, right? That's like a place that I really don't think I do well. But you have to kind of have a plan, right? And that is one of the things that I cannot stress to people enough is that be open to making connections. And even if that person doesn't seem like they have value today to you, you truly never know when they may become valuable or have a connection they can pass along or a job opportunity. And I think the position I'm in is the perfect example. Someone who came through my life 10 years ago at a completely different phase for completely unrelated reason, ended up, having a job opportunity for me 10 years later, is now probably one of the best bosses that I've ever had. And, I hope that we continue to work together for a very long time. But, would I have known that? Would 22-year-old me would have known that? Absolutely not. But I'm really glad that, I had him in my network and was able to reach out and make that connection.
And kind of the other thing that I'm hearing from you is that also the timing. We always think, oh, this is not a good timing. This is a better timing. So you don't have to wait for the perfect timing to make a change. So obviously you moved during COVID, which seems like, oh, that's the worst timing possible. So I'm also hearing, okay, maybe you don't have to put. I'm not, not too much worry about whether it's the right time or not, and kind of take a leap of faith. And if you have an opportunity that you want to try, just seize the opportunity.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer in that now over the past couple of years. Taking the leap to join Riva during COVID is certainly an example. But during that time frame, I was also going through a divorce. And I met my current husband about a month after I separated from my ex-husband. So that was also one of those seriously kind of moments where you're like, this really isn't the time for this. But really kind of, said, I'm not going to say no to the right person who walks in my life just because of timing. And similarly, I started my podcast when I was pregnant, and my co-host had just had his first daughter as well too. So never a good time, I think, to start some of these brand new things, but there's no time like the present, right? If the opportunity presents and it feels like a good opportunity, you'd be doing your future self a disservice by not taking that shot.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then you kind of started the role, and you took on yourself. You identified needs, business needs, and you took on yourself more responsibilities and kind of naturally expanded your role.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what makes, my progression at Riva successful. And it's a little bit easier to do in a small or a mid-sized business where there are tons of opportunities to, go above and beyond in your role. It is definitely more difficult when you're in a larger business that has a lot of set roles and a lot of things are already sort of taken care of. But I think at any corporation or any business or any organization, there's always opportunities to step up and say, hey, I've done this before, or I see this issue and I have a solution, or I'd like to try something. To be able to put yourself out there and show additional value beyond what you sort of signed up to do brings a lot of trust and a lot of faith. And by taking on some of those things very early on, I mean, some of them were huge, right? We have a annual charity event that is very important to the CEO. I'd never been to the event before, but I had a lot of event planning experience. And so coming in, I made pretty big changes to how they were operating the event day one, which a lot of people were nervous about. But at the end of the day, I said, this is a charity event. Our focus needs to be raising money for the charity. We can't sort of, you know, hope people make volunteer donations at the door, right? We should inform a ticket structure and other things like that. And within 1 week, we sort of blew away all past fundraising goals just through ticket sales alone, just through putting a couple of pieces in place. So I think very early on, I was able to show like, hey, yes, I came to do marketing and that is my focus. But there are a lot of other places at this organization that I can help, and our immediate goal together really is to help grow this business. So how can I align to make sure that we're all moving forward and that we're growing this business together?
Yeah. So that's wonderful. just also not being afraid to kind of utilize your skills and experiences and make changes, and kind of challenge the status quo or what others used to do, and kind of try to bring novelty and your own experience and ideas.
Yeah, even if it's not something that you're comfortable with, but you're someone who will figure it out, I think that's also a really great way to approach some of these problems. I have a lot of colleagues and a lot of other women in my life who have taken some of these roles at the company or other companies and said, I've never done this before, but I will certainly figure it out. And I think that shows a lot of bravery and just like, proof points too, that like, hey, I know I'm a competent human being. I can figure this out. We'll get it done. I'm willing to learn and put myself out there and learn a new skill. And I think that's, the flip side. If maybe you don't have a specific skill set that can be leveraged to a problem you're seeing, if you're willing to learn and dig in, I think that goes miles as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what are some challenges that you had when you started kind of the role, or through the journey to becoming a VP?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple that come to mind. They when I came on board, I was a director, and that was at the time part of their upper leadership. And then they reorged to be a little bit more streamlined, so that it was VPs and above, which meant that pretty quickly I lost my official space at the table. So then I was working through a proxy. I had to kind of inform my boss of what we're doing. She's making the updates for me, and that was difficult because, especially in a marketing role, you're very reliant on other stakeholders to get your job done. I don't own the content. I own a lot of processes. I own creative. I can help make things better, but I can't write the blog post for our solutions team. I can't, go out there and talk about the work that our client teams are doing because I'm not doing that work. So I do need people to come to the table, to be willing participants. When you don't have a visibility seat at the table, it makes your job inherently a lot harder. So that was something that I struggled with for, a couple of years, being in this role where I was leading the department, but not at official capacity at that table because I didn't have the title. But the title didn't change my job, right? When I, ultimately got that title, my job, of course, it looks very different because I've taken on more scope. But at the end of the day, I was leading the department then, and I'm leading the department now. So that was very much a challenge, trying to work through to be able to make visibility for myself, build those relationships when you don't have, that official seat at the table, and people are, okay coming to you for these things. Another thing that was really challenging was, I think, partly my age. So when I joined the company, I was, 31, coming in to build a department. And, I had full faith from the CEO. We're a small company. We had a lot of other younger people, but I was certainly on the younger end of some of the other department leaders, and especially much younger than a lot of the C-suite that came in. And at the time, we had a CFO who was, an older gentleman, who was very much set in his ways that, a woman who was in her 30s couldn't possibly be in charge of some of these projects. And one of the major things that we were working on was a website redesign, which came with a fairly large budget, working with vendors, working, a whole year long project. And it took multiple like conversations, emails, like outreach, for him to understand that he kept emailing our CTO about this, and he's not even involved in the project. He just kept assuming this must be run by a man over here. So
Yeah.
dealing with some of that, like old school, like older generation, was a little bit difficult in some of those roles because I do need you are the CFO. I do need this money, right? I do need you to understand that I'm leading this effort. Yes, it is possible for me to do this work, and I need you to come along on the journey with me. And I shouldn't be necessarily disqualified because of my age.
So, do you have any tips for women kind of facing maybe similar challenges or some other, but related to kind of biases against them, whether it's age, gender, color, race, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pretty forward, upfront person, and I understand this is probably not everyone's approach. But the couple of times that that's happened in my career over, multiple different organizations, um, I've kind of gone right to that person and said, like, cut it out, right? Like, this is my role, this is my responsibility. I'm not quite sure why we're having these issues. I've never done anything to qualify me from being in your eyes not comparable to do this, right? So I've always had pretty direct conversations with these individuals that it's like, I'm here, I'm doing this work, I need you to get on board, and if you have a problem with that, go talk to the CEO, right? Because ultimately he's my boss, he hired me to do this role, and if you're going to get in my way, go talk to him, essentially. And that's worked in most cases, honestly. I don't think a lot of people expect you, especially older men with younger women coming to them and saying like, cut it out. I don't think a lot of people take that approach and are comfortable being so direct. But that has actually worked in a lot of situations. And after those conversations, I've really seen most of those individuals back off or sort of start to treat me with a little bit more respect for the role and the things that I'm trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I'm sure that I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, but I think yeah, sometimes it's really important to call people out, and even you don't have to do it very kind of confrontational. You can just say, just very assertively, yeah, I mean that's my role, that's what I'm doing. So I really want us to collaborate, but I need you to respect, that I got here because I'm capable.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your journey to VP, and I know you were also pregnant during that time. So, kind of tell us how that kind of came about.
Yeah. So, about 2 years into my tenure there, I was still sitting in the director role, and I started to have more conversations with my boss, supervisor at the time, about taking on a senior director role. Again, I'm someone who keeps pretty good track of like a lot of the brags and accomplishments that we have. So I knew that I had the quote receipts to show that we were being successful and that we were, accomplishing our job and then some on top of what I had signed up to do. But my supervisor at the time, who's no longer at the company, really was like, maybe, again, it was sort of one of those things where he really truly enjoyed being on top, the point person for all of the different departments under him, and really felt uncomfortable with someone coming up to represent their own department, essentially.
Yeah,
So once he left the company, thankfully I'd always worked on building a relationship with our CEO because, again, it's his company at the end of the day, and marketing has to be aligned with him. So it behooved me to have a good relationship with our CEO. So I started having conversations with him directly, and was talking about, all the accomplishments, all the additional things I'd taken on. It was good timing at that time because I, in a past life had been a management consultant. So I had a lot of meeting facilitation experience, and we were starting to think about our strategic planning cycle. So I was able to offer my skills that, weren't present across the company elsewhere to help with meeting facilitation and design, to help with some of these strategic conversations. And that put me in front of a lot of individuals and put me in direct line of sight of the CEO, who said, hey, this is a really cool skill set that we would have had to pay for an external consultant for, but we have someone who can do it inside. So being able to take on that project, I think, was very helpful to my case because it was so visible to the company. And that really kind of got the ball rolling in terms of me being able to position myself for a senior director role that year with, a handshake promise from the CEO that if everything continued going in the direction that it was going, that I would be able to take that VP role officially in sort of the next, anniversary for me. And so I didn't have anything on paper, which always makes you a little nervous, but it is the CEO. He had fulfilled all of his promises up until then. So I felt pretty comfortable about it, when we left that conversation, that, this is not something we can do today. Here's kind of a midway step. We'll get you to senior director, a compensation raise. And then, this is sort of what we're aiming for, in the next 12 months. The big curveball, as you said, was, about 6 or 7 months into that, I found out I was pregnant, which was so exciting. My husband
yeah,
and I, wanted to start a family, so we're very excited about that. And once we sort of got through the first trimester, when I was more comfortable starting to tell people that we were expecting, it kind of dawned on me that I was, 5 or 6 months away from assuming this position that they had promised me, which was actually only 4 weeks before my daughter's due date.
wow.
And so I wasn't nervous to tell people. I knew everyone would be very excited and very supportive. We have a ton of working parents at the company. And so I didn't think that was going to be an issue. But not having something on paper, it could have been very easy for the CEO to say, that timing just doesn't work for us. If you're going to go straight out on maternity leave, maybe we think about, delaying this promotion, or maybe we'll hit you up next cycle kind of thing once, you're sort of back in play. But none of that happened. And when I told everyone was very, very excited, very congratulatory. And then we actually had our leadership offsite in Miami that year. And the CEO came up to me at happy hour after dinner unprompted and was like, "Hey, are you ready to be a VP?"
Wow.
And like, everything just melted away, right? Because I was so nervous to kind of like poke that bear. And we also at the time were bringing in an SVP who was going to oversee the division that I worked for. So there was a new individual coming in who had the ability to kind of block that promotion. And I was about to go out on maternity leave. So all of the pieces in my mind were pointing towards like, this is not going to happen. It will happen. Maybe it's just going to be delayed. But it was really nice to hear that, just because I was going on maternity leave, that didn't change the plans. The promotion went through, January 1. On January 29th, I welcomed my daughter. So, everyone was very supportive. My team kept rolling. The world didn't end, right? We all made it through maternity leave. But it was really, really cool to see that, all of the pieces that I had put in play and all of the work that I had dedicated to get myself to that position was honored, and was not, I wasn't asked to take a pause because I, was able to start my family.
For sure. I mean, this is a wonderful story, and I wish all the leadership, at companies would be like that. Like, okay, you're having a baby. That doesn't mean that it should kind of, come instead of your career progression. You can do both.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that my experience is not typical, especially in the
Yeah.
United States. That there are a lot of other companies, in our market, in our size, where I would have not have had that experience. And I mean, the thought did cross my mind that at some point it's too late, right? I'm going to have this baby here, but if this doesn't go the way that I want it to go, then maybe it is time for me to move on and find an atmosphere that would be supportive of this. But thankfully, I didn't have to make that move. And I think, as women who are climbing the career ladder and do want to start families or expand their families, I think that is something that you have to take into consideration. Is unfortunately, is this environment going to support that? Because as much as you may love where you are currently, that might not be the right place for you to continue to, progress and be able to have your family. So it's definitely a big consideration that as you're thinking through this, am I in the right spot to make this move?
For sure, and not all environments are supportive, but I think that based on kind of what you described, you build a really strong organization and team that probably could have operated for some time without you when you were on maternity leave, and then when you got back, you could kind of resume from where you left.
Yeah. So I try to build the infrastructure, right? I mean, it's marketing, so things change day to day. But the ironic part is that my communications manager, who's been with me for almost my entire tenure at Riva, is also now pregnant. So she's 8 months
Oh,
pregnant, and she's just about to go out on her maternity leave. So I'm very much looking forward to paying back the favor of, carrying on the team and taking on parts of her role, because she did a wonderful job while I was out. So now we're preparing for her to be out. But yeah, that's just kind of the season that we're in. Is that my team is all women, and we're all in that age where we have children or want to start a family or want to add more children to our family. So it's just something that we've built into our culture to be able to cover for each other, make sure that we're all informed on what everyone's doing, that we're all cross trained, that there's documentation, that we have pretty good plans in place so that, at the drop of a hat, if my daughter gets sick, which she did last week, someone could pick up and step in. My graphic designer has 2 children as well. So if she's got to be out for that, we've very much sort of built that into our team culture to make sure that the moms have each other. And
definitely.
then, when my communications manager has a bad day, being pregnant is absolutely terrible, we're able to cover down and make sure that she can take the time off that she needs to feel better.
That's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear that Riva has that culture, and at least your kind of organization have that culture that support women who, have children and want to expand their family. That's how it should be. Unfortunately, it's not in all places, but that's kind of how it should be.
Yeah, I know. And the second I got my daughter in my hands, I think 2 weeks later, I told my husband I wanted another child. So clearly we haven't
Wow.
started that yet. But babies are, they're cute, right? You
They're
definitely
adorable. Yeah, I have
want
four,
another.
so I have four children, so I can definitely agree. But personally, I needed some break between
Yes.
pregnancies.
No, no, no.
Yeah.
We haven't started trying. We definitely do want another one. So that's something that we'll, at some point have to put in the plan too, is this sort of a little bit of a rotating door between my, department. If my communications manager decides to have a second one after hers too, right? That would sort of put us on a couple year cycle where, one of us is always sort of out or on the way out. But we'll make it work. I think that's what women do. They just sort of find a way to make it work. And if it's important to you, it's a priority.
Absolutely. And I think that actually juggling between home and work and being a mom makes us even better.
Yeah. I mean, there are some weeks, like this past week, I was like, man, this is really hard. And I don't know what I
Yeah.
signed up for because there's a lot of things swirling both on the personal and professional side this week. And my daughter, got hit with some daycare germs and that took all of us out. And there's a lot
Oh,
of other things happening right now. So it's just kind of the perfect storm of, a lot of chaos on both ends of the cycle. But apart from those weeks, right? I think if you are able to figure out how to successfully prioritize your world and be flexible, right? You can write all of the plans that you want to, and that's just not what's going to actually end up happening. So you have to let go, I think, of a little bit of like perfectionism. And that was a little bit hard for me at the beginning of my pregnancy, especially as an athlete, going to the gym and not even be able to walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes without feeling like I was going to throw up. But you eventually sort of figure out this is the season that I'm in. I have to sort of reset my expectations on what I'm capable of doing because at that time I was also growing a human being. So I
yeah.
had to worry a little bit less about, what my output at the gym was and just be thankful that I was in a place where I could be at the gym at all and be able to still have that space, be able to, be safe, be healthy during my pregnancy, but just reset my expectations on what I was able to accomplish. So I think that's just how you have to approach life as a mom at any stage is just setting the expectations for what feels realistic, throwing half of that out the door, and then just sort of going with the flow. Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we have a great environment for my daughter and that she is my top priority. But I can do that and also advance my career if I'm able to prioritize, set those expectations, set the boundaries, and really work within the community system to say, today's not the day. I can't get it done. Who can help
Yeah.
me, right? And
Yeah.
be able to willing to pay that back when that question comes back to you from someone in the community that helped you out in the past.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I wanted to mention one thing, kind of on the transition and your growth to a VP, that you mentioned kind of you openly discussed with your manager or with the CEO your kind of aspirations and the plan.
Mhm.
And when I was still a director, you're talking about a VP role. And it was kind of natural, right? Conversation around what you wanted. And yeah, it may not happen immediately, but it was kind of very clear to both of you what was the kind of career progression you wanted. And this is super important, right? To be very open and transparent about what you want in your career. Because when we don't do that, how can we expect things to happen?
Yeah, no one can read your mind, right?
Yeah.
And I think especially at a small business where there is no set ladder and there is no one above me, I only have to build the rung as I go. And so, now that I'm sitting in this VP role for the past 8 months, I've already started to have those conversations about how do I get to the next role, which is SVP. But my ultimate goal, and this has been stated, I want to be your CMO. That role doesn't exist. How do we get there? What is the timeline? What things do you need to see from me to be able to feel confident that I can do the SVP role and ultimately join the C-suite as your first CMO? So that conversation happens the day after you get the promotion, right? You're like, okay, we did it. I'm the VP now. How do I get to the next level? Because if someone has to be able to articulate to you, I need to see you do these things. This is where I need help. This is what I'm expecting at this level. And you need to be able to deliver those. So if you don't ask the question and state what your goals are, you'll never get that plan from someone.
Yeah.
You'll never be able to say, you know, just because you think you're doing a good job or you know you want these things, again, no one can read your mind. So you do have to be pretty explicit and have those conversations about this is my ultimate aspirations. And I think that's appreciated too, because then, the CEO can say, I've got all these extra things that I need help with, or I could use your thoughts on. And that sets you both up because you're taking things off of their plate and being helpful and helping the company grow, but you're also setting yourself up to success to take that next step in your own career.
Yeah, and I think that as women, we need to be more proactive around this. I mean, I think I'm huge generalizing, but in general, what I've seen in my career, because I mostly work with men tend to be more vocal about what they want, and women tend to shy away from just explicitly talking about it. They feel uncomfortable for some reason. So it's just talking about it. It's not demanding. It's just sharing and having a conversation and planning and seeing, what are the things that you need to do, and it makes, as you said, it makes it easier on both sides.
Yeah, then there's no guessing. But I agree
Yeah.
with that. I think a lot of men are very forward and sort of what they want. Women are, always sort of feel like there's this stigma that I can't ask for these things or I can't be very upfront with it. And again, if you're in the right environment, I think you won't see that. I think you'll see that people welcome that they want you to help you accomplish your goals. And that's how I feel about, the team that I have under me is that every time I take a step up the ladder, that is another rung that's available to bring them up with me. And so I have those conversations with my team as well as, where do you see yourself, at this company in the next year? What is your aspirations here? If you weren't here, what would you be doing? Tell me what you want to accomplish. Are there places where I can put you in front of people or give you ownership where you can be very visible so you can start to show your value to the company outside of the great work that you're doing, as a part of this team. So always finding opportunities for people to like take things off of my plate because I'm busy, right? But set them up for success so that they're visible, so that when, they're ultimately at a place where they're ready for the next step or they're ready for the next promotion, it's not a surprise. Everyone in the company has already seen the great work that they're doing. And so when I go up to battle for that and say, hey, this person, is ready for the next level, you're met with agreement and not, will tell me why or tell me, show me the list of things that they've done. I mean, I also have that list. So don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. You definitely have to keep track of all the things that you do because there's a lot of recency bias, right? People remember the last thing that you did, but they don't remember all the really great things you did 6 months ago. So if you're not keeping track of that, no one else is. So definitely keep that list. Keep it for your team. Keep it for yourselves. I have a lot of templates that I have my team sort of keep those things together. And I have something that I update year over year that's just like all the accomplishments, whether or not I'm asking for a promotion or an upgrade. I keep it just so the next time that I am ready to have that conversation, the document is pretty much good to go. And all I have to do is dust it off and send it over. Even if they don't read it, you still have this impressive document that you can send through and say, here's all the things that I've done since I've been here, that I've accomplished in whatever time frame you want. But it's been very helpful to have that because a lot of companies do require that, or HR departments will require that. So it just kind of depends on the culture of your company. But either way, you definitely should be keeping track of your accomplishments and helping your team succeed to keep track of theirs as well.
Absolutely, and multiple women I talk to talk about this having this brag bank or whatever they call it, like the list of achievement, which is very important because you also forget, not
Yes.
just your manager. And also, you mentioned templates, and in our pre-call, you mentioned like you have a template for promotion justification. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I took a couple years ago when I was starting to think about, I would really like to be able to have this VP seat at the role. And that was the challenge that was given to me was, well, we sort of need this justification letter. It didn't exist at the company. They were just like, hey, you need to be able to justify why. So I sat down and I kind of thought through, okay, if I were my manager or if I was someone who was on the evaluation board for this, what would I be interested in knowing about? And so kind of drafted this like multi-part document that was like, hey, here's the upfront case, right? Like, here's who I am. Here's what I'm asking for. Thank you. Here's why you should get it. And then, sort of pages of the proof points in terms of here's the role that I signed on to do. Here's how I'm operating within that role. And then the important part, I think, for promotions is typically here's what I'm doing above and beyond the expectations that were set for me. A lot of companies expect you to be operating at that next level before they formally give you that title. So for me to be able to say, here's how marketing is doing. Oh, and by the way, we also stood up in internal communications. We also took over events. I also now help with strategic planning. It was all of these additional layers that I've added to my role to say, here's all the additional value you're getting from having me as an employee. And if there's data points that you can share in terms of impact that you've had, that's always really great information to keep. And at our company, we have a sort of a matrix of skill sets and sort of soft skills that are expected depending on sort of the level you're at. So I took a look at that matrix and said, hey, I'm actually operating at 7 is the top level. I'm operating at a level 7 in all of these categories, which is actually your SVP level. But I'm asking for the next step up, which is, at the time, senior director. So I laid that out for people in the matrix so they did not have to go back and do the work for them. So it does take a little bit of time to put this stuff together, but it is one of those documents where if you take a look at it every 6 months, keep it up to date, after the heavy lift is over, you have this wonderful document that you can pull out at any time and justify, hey, give me the next promotion, right? I'm ready to go. So yeah, it's something that I've shared with multiple people, across our team to help them build that case, and whether or not they put that in front of anybody or if it at least gets their, brain going about how they want to position themselves for this. It's just all encompassing so that you leave no question that you are the correct candidate for this position and that you have earned your promotion.
Perfect. Sounds great. If this is something generic enough, I will be happy if you can share it, after the call, and we'll put it in the show notes. And is there anything else you would like to share before we end our call?
No, I absolutely love being able to sort of share my story, and I wish that more people had this experience. But it's kind of my mission now that I'm like a mom and a manager, that I'm trying to be able to sort of empower the next generation to be able to have similar experiences and to not accept that they have to choose between their family or their career. That it's hard. Don't get me wrong. This is not an easy path. But if this is important to you, you absolutely can continue to progress in your career and grow your family. You just have to be very clear about what your goals are, what your boundaries are, and then being able to leverage, the community around you and the environment around you to make a successful space for both to be possible.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Thank you so much, Alex, for being here today. It's been such a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the episode with Alex Love, and stay tuned for what's coming up next week. You are going to love next week's episode. Next week, I'm sitting with Disha Mukherjee, and she's a data engineer, and she has overcome incredible both personal and professional challenges. And she shares a story of resilience from facing life-threatening surgeries, stepping up as the head of her family, and making bold career move from India to the UK. And she's now thriving in tech and is here to inspire you all to pursue your dreams, no matter the obstacles. Trust me, you don't want to miss it out. So sit down, hit subscribe button, turn on the notifications to get the episode as soon as it drops. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening.